Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and it's the afternoon of Friday, September 12th, 2014. Now, a number of events are converging in terms of the necessary actions by persons of goodwill across the globe. One is the unbelievable media hype of the Western NATO-controlled media in favor of that collection of patsies, psychotics, misfits, double agents, mercenaries, brigands known as ISIS. 20 to 30,000 crazies, we're told, are going to conquer the world and create an empire. Well, I guess Tamerlane did it, but I don't see any Tamerlanes in evidence. And on the other side, we're getting reports from the statistical people, the 538 group. They see a 62% chance of the Republicans taking over the Senate. The Rothenberg political report suggests that there's going to be a wave election, a tidal wave, a tsunami in favor of the reactionary Republicans, and they're going to gain 7 seats in the Senate. Well, we know from the Mitch McConnell secret tape where he's groveling for one of the Koch brothers that they will use writers, they will use the budget reconciliation to make sure that everything is rolled back, genocidal austerity, killer cuts in our country, and they will also make sure that there's no relief for those groaning under high-interest student loan debt, and there'll be no help for people who are threatened by foreclosure or anything like this. And there'll be no increase in the minimum wage. So how can these two questions be dealt with? Well, I think the answer comes down to the irascible, apoplectic John McCain, the raving warmonger, the unreconstructed neocon who has forgotten nothing and learned absolutely nothing. A warmonger, and somebody whose military career also is not beyond question, but we won't go into that right now. We'll save that for later. Why does the Democratic Party not get a hold of McCain cavorting in Idlib, Syria in April of 2013 with the world's top terrorist, Baghdadi? At that time, he was already Baghdadi when McCain sat down with him at that table, and you see the picture on the front page of Tarpley.net. It's all up there at Tarpley.net. McCain sits down with a group calling itself the Military Council of the Free Syrian Army. But of course, they're just crazies with different hats, and individual crazies put on different hats, right? They have fun doing that. So McCain sits down, and across from him is this guy known as Bakri at that time, but he was already Baghdadi. That's his nom de bataille, his nom de guerre. So he's Bakri Baghdadi, already the head of ISIS, and then he goes on to become Caliph Ibrahim of the Caliphate, which means the worldwide empire to which everybody is supposed to be subjected. Of course, hard to do with only 30,000 crazies, but maybe they think they can get more. Why does the Democratic Party, aren't there some more congressmen, some senators, some people who are in tough races, put out this McCain picture? McCain consorts with terrorists. McCain gives material support to terrorists. He is committing overt acts, giving aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States and adhering to them and giving them aid and comfort. And there are plenty of witnesses to that overt act, to those overt acts. And you know what I'm talking about. That is the constitutional definition of betraying the country. So we have this picture of McCain sitting down. And of course, Salim Idris, the supposed head until he fled of the Free Syrian Army Military Council, the guy who fled to Doha and perhaps Turkey, and some of his staff fled to Stockholm. They all left when their warehouses were seized at the end of last year, beginning of this year. That's where the Free Syrian Army was meeting. So you've got Idris and you've got Baghdadi, and they're all members of the military council of the Free Syrian Army. So how is it, the ineptitude, the stupidity, the cowardice of the Democratic Party? If you're running against somebody, suppose you're running against Ben Sass, you can say, Ben, when you get to Washington and you have your first meeting of the Republican caucus, ask your pal McCain why he pals around with terrorists, to coin a phrase. And of course, with the case of Obama, it was palling around with people who had been terrorists 20 or 30 years before, right, who had sort of run out of gas. Bad, of course, very bad, and I denounced it. But this is obviously much worse, right, when you've got these crazies, cannibals on the march. And speaking of cannibals, a part of that same gathering, more or less, maybe not exactly in that room, but we're still waiting for the full identification of everybody in those pictures. McCain is later then shown standing up and looking at the camera. That picture is also on Tarpley.net. We have him posing with the person who is widely recognized as the cannibal, the guy who cuts out the heart of his enemy and eats it on camera. So what I'm saying is, Democrats, people who don't want the Republicans to dictate genocidal austerity against the American people, right? Food stamps, minimum wage, that will all be shredded. There may be no minimum wage when they get done. There may be no food stamps when these reactionary Republicans get done. I'm talking Cannibal Gate against John McCain. I'm talking Caliph Gate against McCain. Baghdadi Gate. ISIS Gate against McCain. Why was he meeting with those terrorists? What did he promise them? Well, we have a little window into that. We have this statement by McCain where he says, all of us wanted to arm ISIS, a Freudian slip, maybe, lapsus Freudianus. We all wanted to arm ISIS. I think he means Hillary, Petraeus, Panetta, and the rest of them. We all wanted to arm ISIS, but Obama stopped us by himself. Well, that's pretty good advertising copy for Obama. We also want to know this reported meeting, right? Thierry Masson says that when he was there in Libya, he actually got to look at a document which was the summary of a secret NATO meeting held in February 2011, just as this entire orgy of destabilization, tsunami of putschs was getting going. McCain was apparently present at the February 2011 secret NATO meeting in Cairo. According to some, he was the chairman of the meeting. And we're told that also in that meeting, according to Masson, Bernard-Henri Lévy, who later on whispered in Sarkozy's ear, time to bomb Libya, and a failed state, an open sore, a terrorist base on the Mediterranean is now the result. And, of course, the Libyan turncoat Jibril, who walked into the meeting as an official of the Libyan government, but then he had a Cairo Road moment, and then he turned into a Democratic rebel. So McCain, and of course Mitch McConnell promising Koch genocidal austerity. Back in a minute. Afternoon of Friday the 12th of September here in Washington. So that, I think, is a strategy. Get a hold of those pictures of McCain with the Caliph, with Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, haggling, offering. Get a hold of the picture of McCain with the cannibal, and then you can show the picture of the guy, the cannibal, eating the human heart. And then maybe that tape where McCain says, we all wanted to arm ISIS, but Obama wouldn't let us. And then let's get some leaks going about that NATO meeting, February 2011 in Cairo. McCain, were you there? Were you the chairman? What did you talk about? Did you talk about the way that the Muslim Brotherhood was going to overthrow those governments and then set up terror regimes? Now, the Republicans, I think, are in potentially very bad shape, although unfortunately the Democrats, too cowardly, too stupid to see this. When an American president goes on television, as Obama did, and you can point to these films, right, whatever the films are worth. I don't think the films are worth that much, but the films are an undoubted propaganda success. So let's start from the perception, I guess, since we have to. President goes on television and he says he's asking for support against ISIS. There is a rally round effect, okay? Even Carter got it. If Carter got it, anybody can get it. The population closest ranks around the president tends to support what he's proposing, especially since he's proposing something they can understand, right? Do some bombing, get some other people to send in troops. So it's relatively easy to grasp, does not comport tremendous sacrifices on the surface. The Republicans are freaking. That's what I see. The Republicans are freaking about the rally round effect, and their response is carping, nitpicking, sniping, foot-dragging, and cowardice. They say, oh, but you said this on the 19th, and now on the 22nd, you had a comma in a different place, and all this endless textual stupidity. You said they were the JV, and they're really the varsity. All right. Strategic debates are about actions, not words. It is the guns that speak, not the teleprompters. So the Republicans, I think, are extremely vulnerable on this, and they're the leader of their party. I'm sorry, McCain, right? Since Mitt has gone back into semi-retirement, McCain is the main voice of the Republican Party. Now, concerning, we have Cannibal Gate, Caliph Gate, ISIS Gate, Baghdadi Gate, McCain Gate. The other thing is, if this reaches a certain momentum, you could see the other night when he got on there with Carney on CNN, all of this covered on the Twitter feed, right? Webster Tarpley Twitter feed. You can goad McCain into a frenzy. You know the Lincoln movie where the Democrats try to goad Thad Stevens into a frenzy and make him say things? Well, McCain is perpetually apoplectic. You can goad him into a frenzy. And they'll say, yes, we wanted to arm ISIS to attack Assad and then send them to attack Iran and then send them to attack Russia. Because, of course, we now have the statement from, we had it last week already, the statement from Baghdadi or his gang, right, the ISIS people. They say they want to attack Russia. They want to attack Russia through Chechnya. They want to go through the Caucasus and Transcaucasus. They wish to strike at Moscow. And interestingly enough, John Kerry on his trip gave a interview to the Voice of America where he says, we want Russia to understand that they're a target. They're a target, says Kerry, kind of a threat in its own way, but that the Russians would be welcome in the coalition. Well, if the Russians are welcome in the coalition, I've talked about this before, why not send an air wing of Russian fighter bombers to Syria and let them handle that side of the border? So the nice division of labor, U.S. on the Iraqi side and Russia on the Syrian side. But of course, the Syrians have been openly welcoming. We have the deputy foreign minister of Syria yesterday. That is Mr. Mekdad. This is the number 2 for Moalem. So we had Moalem 2 weeks ago, Mekdad now. That Syria will welcome U.S. efforts against the common enemy, the terrorists of ISIS. Now, I would urge the Russians and others to look at it this way, right? I think Assad is a great realist. I think Assad is flexible. He's not a pedant. He's not going to worry about the technicalities of international law. I think if the U.S. or anybody bombs ISIS, then Syria will have no problem with that. Just stay out there in the east of the country and clobber ISIS. I think Russia could do it better. It would be good to deliver some nice jets to Syria. Let them do it themselves. But in the short run, it may be the U.S. And it's clear the attitude of the Syrian government is to welcome the U.S. effort against terrorism. And let me point out, right? They say, oh, we don't want ISIS to have a safe haven in Syria. There is no safe haven in Syria. ISIS in Syria is continuously subjected to attacks by the Syrian Arab Air Force and the Syrian Arab Army. So that is simply a fraud. They're under constant attack. Assad did not create ISIS. NATO training camps in Jordan and Turkey created ISIS. And ISIS was created with money from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. We'll get to that in just a minute. So we also have Elliot Engel of NBC usefully pointing out the Free Syrian Army is non-existent. There is no such thing. What would you do if a commander, top general, came and said, I'm going to base my strategy on the Tooth Fairy or the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus? Those are every bit as mythical at this point, every bit as imaginary as the Free Syrian Army. They've all scattered. They all fled. They took their money and ran. There is no such thing. So therefore, our call to the U.S. Congress, of course, vote against $500 million for that gaggle of lunatics calling themselves the Free Syrian Army. Right? The only people left there are the con artists who are going in for the bitter end. And the one thing that McDodd pointed out that I would repeat: Obama, get on the phone, call President Assad, call Assad, coordinate the bombing, exchange intelligence, avoid incidents, make it cooperative, costs you nothing. And indeed, I would have to say, given the fragility of Obama's mentality, do it secretly. Okay, do it behind the scenes, do it confidentially, but do it. You don't have to announce it. You know, your left liberal, Samantha Power, will be angry with you, and Rice may be angry with you, but you, Obama, you call Assad, coordinate the bombing, clobber ISIS that way. Back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, the 12th of September. And let me point out that we have the McCain pictures where he's cavorting with terrorists, palling around, as Palin used to say, before she got arrested in a drunken brawl, whatever it was, and then freed. Palling around. McCain is palling around with Baghdadi, the Caliph now, Caliph Ibrahim. He's palling around with the Cannibal. Then we've got McConnell palling around with the Koch brother, saying, we're going to crucify the American people. We're going to flay them alive. We're going to do an economic ISIS on the average wage earner. There's also this other interesting question, right? Fox News, thinking they're very clever, have brought forward some contractors, right? Some guys who are not exactly our national heroes, but these contractors come forward in their book, 13 Hours, and they say there was a CIA stand-down order for Benghazi. Well, fold that in, too. Because if there's a CIA stand-down order, that could only come from one place, the commander of the CIA, General David Petraeus, the neocon general. So with that, you're right in the middle of the Romney October surprise in September, October surprise in the area of early voting, which was Benghazi. Now, let's look at the Russian situation. The first thing, of course, the action points are Poroshenko. He's called Poroshenko because his policies are obscene, like Crazy Eddie. His policies were, his prices were insane. But Poroshenko, he's porno because his policies are obscene. He's coming to Washington, D.C., coming to New York. He's going to address the United States Congress in a joint session on September 18th. He's also going to be in New York for the opening the session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, or he'll be in New York. I call upon all persons of goodwill in Washington, D.C., in New York, in any other place, where this character is intending to go. Protest him. He's here for one purpose and one purpose only, to drag you into war, to make you pay for his fascist excesses, and to have you and or your children die in that war, which he has now lost. And I say, the United States has a certain amount of anti-fascist creds. Under Franklin D. Roosevelt, we were the anti-fascist, anti-Nazi power par excellence. Unlike everybody else, we never made a deal with Hitler. Never. Hitler never addressed a joint session of the Congress. Mussolini never addressed a joint session of the Congress. Franco of Spain, never. Salazar of Portugal, never. Codreanu of Romania, Gurbush of Hungary, right? On and on. None of them were ever invited to address a joint session of Congress. So no to them. Notice also, there's nothing in the report on the MH17. Everything has been suppressed. And rather, what we do have is these people, I guess it's either the Azov Battalion or the Donetsk Battalion, are sending the pro-Kiev fascist forces, are sending severed human heads in wooden boxes to their families. And I'll have that picture up on Twitter within a couple of hours. So by the time you put this, you hear this broadcast, the heads are being sent out. There's two new rounds of sanctions, right? We don't need to go through the details. They're sort of more of the same. The big thing is, the big vulnerability is they're saying, the European sanctions say that up to now, Russian companies have been able to get much needed credit from European banks on a 90-day basis. This is now cut down to 30 days. This is asking for it. Asking for it means we've got to a point where the Russian central bank must stop acting as a central bank serving only bankers and become a national bank serving the entire economy, and it needs to put out several trillion rubles, the equivalent of several $trillion certainly, but not based on dollars, not part of the Fed scheme. Put out those credits as long-term, low-interest credits for the Russian companies involved. Switch over to dirigism. Liquidate the last remnants of the IMF shock therapy. Break the power of the oligarchs, the Medvedev, Gref, well, it was Khodorkovsky in the past, right? But the Kudrin faction, Kudrin, Medvedev, Gref, and Nabiulina of the central bank, also apparently on the wrong side of this stuff. So switch over to a dirigistic protectionist system. And of course, the U.S. has been raving that Putin is isolated. Well, Putin just had a productive meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, took place in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and he was garnering significant support from a number of places. President Xi of China was there, Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan was there, Atarbayev of Kyrgyzstan, Karimov of Uzbekistan, and of course the host Rahmon of Tajikistan. And interestingly, there is a statement from Uzbekistan, from Karimov, saying it is wrong not to take Russian interests into account when you're dealing with the future of Ukraine. Putin has said, I don't understand what's going on. We've got a functioning ceasefire now. Maybe there are Western forces who don't like the fact that I have promoted a peaceful solution. The Western forces have backed the armed military, mob coup in February that ousted the elected government of Yushchenko and brought in the Kiev fascists. And we've also had this, he says, we've had this punitive expedition by the Ukrainian army plus the fascist forces that have also been supported by the Western powers. And that's all true. The line seems to be this. In La Stampa of Turin this week, we've had this interesting analysis I think also from the Financial Times, that Merkel, this is supposedly the thinking of the group around Merkel. Now, I've always warned Stephen Cohen, don't assume that Merkel is worth anything, right? Any kind of intelligence or courage from Merkel, that's a tall order. Anyway, the Merkel analysis is this. Merkel feels that Putin has pretty much secured his goals in Ukraine. These will not be able to be rolled back, but rather Merkel wants more sanctions. Merkel is for sanctions, and she says the sanctions will not they will cause problems primarily with the top 10%, the oligarchs in particular, right? The top 0.25% or whatever they are. The ones who want to go to Mallorca, the ones who want to fly around, the ones who have Aspen and Vail and the Bahamas and all this stuff, that they will feel the pressure. The idea is make the oligarchs feel the pressure, and then they will force Putin to pull back or maybe overthrow him. Is not spelled out, but that seems to be the hope, that they would overthrow him. Now, this is generally the most vulgar and stupid CIA analysis, right? We heard this from a Russian turncoat or I don't know what at the meeting there in the Congress in the Hart Office building in early June. There's a very vulgar level. If this is Merkel's thinking, this is really dumb, and it won't work. But I would say if I'm Putin, I would say, well, if they're going to turn the oligarchs against me, I'd better cut those oligarchs down to size preemptively. And if they're going to try to cut off my funding, my new credit through Europe, well, I better start the process. I'm listening to Gladyev and start using the Russian central bank as a national bank. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., and against the afternoon of Friday, the 12th of September. We've just had the 9/11 anniversary. Take a look at tarpley.net, a little bit of a photo essay, some pictures I thought were interesting of the new Ground Zero Memorial, the two abysses, and the museum that are there. And if you know anything about it, you'll see why these pictures, each one of them has something to tell us. But now let's start our panorama of struggle, and we're going to start in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and we want to get an update from our good friend, the Reverend Edward Pinkney, who is out there fighting the good fight, right, trying to get the imposed, right, the usurping mayor of Benton Harbor, Hightower, a creature of Whirlpool and Wall Street, get him ousted in the form of a recall election. So, Reverend, bring us up to date, please.
I tell you, Webster, it's really a pleasure to be on the show, and I tell you, we had quite a week this week. On Monday, as you know, I went up to Detroit to support the people in the city of Detroit about this water crisis, and also what they did a fundraiser to try to help me get enough money so we can go to the appeal to the Supreme Court, not the appeal, because we already been there. But let me say this: on yesterday, we went to the county board commission meeting, and we talked about the appeal. And they said that what we're doing, filing going to the Supreme Court, is that we are the one responsible of denying the people the right to choose, which is on the other foot. They are the ones. They're trying to decide who's going to be the mayor in the city of Benton Harbor. They do not have that right to try to choose the mayor here in the city of Benton Harbor. That's wrong. And they're using our money to try to keep us from having the mayor of our choice or even having an election to see who will be the mayor. I tell you, Webster, it was a heated situation on yesterday. They had to call out the sheriff department. They wanted to arrest me simply because I told them that even if we lose in the Supreme Court, that we were going to go to the federal court. And if we lose at the federal court, we were going to go to the federal Supreme Court, and they didn't like that. So it's really, really been a real challenge. We've been fighting this battle. We continue to do the things that need to be done, Webster, and we really, really need currency, money, to make this thing happen. We did raise almost $400. So, but we still short $600 more that we need in order to make this thing happen. So we got a guy who's willing to do it pro bono, but he said with the filing fees and all the filing fees, it's going to cost at least it's going to cost $1,000. So we have raised over $400 right now, but now we definitely need funds to make this thing happen.
All right, Reverend. So we're talking about going from the Michigan State Court of Appeals, the second level, to the Michigan State Supreme Court, and that's $1,000 in filing fees, and your lawyer is willing to work for free. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. He's willing to file for free, but he said that we must get the filing fee plus all the copying fee and plus all the other things, because it's about 5 or 6 lawyers that they have. We got to make copies for them. We got to make copies for the Supreme Court, which is about 7 of those. It's so many copies. He said it's just going to take a lot of money. And also you got to pay the filing fee, which is one of the things which is important. So we're really just doing the things that need to be done, staying focused, not getting sidetracked. And remember, it's about the people. That's the only reason we're fighting this battle, Webster, is it's about the people. And we're trying to make sure they understand how important it is that we stand behind the people. Let the people choose who they want to be mayor in their city. Not the corporations, not the county, not anybody else. Let the people live in the city make that decision.
And let me just ask you, the county board that you just mentioned, are those people, are those officials that have been named by Snyder under the emergency manager law, or have they been put there by Whirlpool? How did that work?
Those are Whirlpool people who support Whirlpool. And here's what we do. We have a recall in for the clerk, the county clerk. We do have a recall in for her. We filed not only one, but we had 6 people to file recalls on her because they're going to try to protect her at all costs. So we have to go to Lansing on the 18th once again. And we got different people filing them. So that way they're going to have to go 6 times, 6 people, and it's going to take them just that more time to make sure that they understand that we're serious about what we're doing.
All right, and the goal is to get Marcus Muhammad on the ballot as the alternative to Hightower.
Absolutely.
And is Marcus Muhammad out there campaigning? Is he educating the people about what's going on in these courtrooms?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, then, you better tell people where they can send a contribution.
Okay, you can send it to Banco, B-A-N-C-O, 1940 Union, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. That's Banco, B-A-N-C-O, 1940 Union Avenue, Benton Harbor, Michigan, 49022. Or you can go to my website. You can go to BHBANCO.org, Banco, and you can use a credit card and send money that way too. We need at least $600. We need it no later than next Friday. And I know, whatever people can send would be wonderful, but you can go to my website, use a credit card. That's BHBanco.org. BHBanco.org. On my website, you got a button for PayPal. We really, really need the money. We're not going to stop fighting until we get this thing done. And I really, really appreciate you, Webster, this opportunity to spread the word so people can know that we're not just here twiddling our thumbs. We're here fighting for the people.
I've heard one of the leading rabbis in the Boston area got interested in your struggle there, and I think he's been in touch with you. So I hope there are more such people, and the way that they can break the ice, so to speak, is send in a contribution in the two ways that the Reverend mentioned. It's Banco 1940 Union, Benton Harbor, Michigan 49022, if I got that right, and then bhbanco.org, and use the PayPal feature on that.
And they can call me at 269-925-0001, just like the rabbi did. I really, really appreciated his call. We had a very long and a very, very, very nice conversation.
Excellent. And just on the Detroit water, what's the story there? Are people still getting their water, or are they turning it on again?
They're turning it off again. First they had stopped turning it off. Now they're turning it back on. And turning it off now. And what they're doing now, they was cutting off more than 1,000 people water per day. They have reduced that down to about 350, and that's why I was up there on Monday, actually to go out there, and we had a couple of protesters on Monday. We did a few things that we do, but my job was just to encourage the people to make sure they understand that it's not just your fight, it's my fight too. And that's why I went up there. That's why they asked me to come up there, and that's why it's so important. And look. It's not just...
We're running out of time, Reverend.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, please, everybody, if you can, donate. Go to bhbanco.org and donate a few dollars.
The ways to do that in the next segment. Thank you, Reverend. We'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye. And we'll be back in a second. Welcome back to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking from Washington, D.C. Well, this week we had Obama's address to the nation about ISIS. We had the NATO summit in Wales last week, and the winds of war are blowing again. Of course, here in the U.S., this immediately involves the Senate, right? Senators have got to vote on treaties. They've got to vote on ambassadors and other appointments, indeed all appointments, but of a special importance are those foreign policy appointments. The Senate actually provides advice and consent to the president about matters of foreign policy. So you want to make sure you don't get warmongers in the Senate. Now, out in Nebraska, I believe we're told that Ben Sasse, the well-heeled Republican candidate with all those problems in his closet, but he has made statements saying that it's important to decimate your enemy if you get into a crisis. And of course, this kind of reckless, irresponsible language is precisely the kind of stuff that has led in recent, 100 years ago, to world wars. So the opposition, of course, to Sasse is our friend Dan Berdoff, running for the United States Senate in Nebraska. And I know, Dan, you put out some important material about the great questions of war and peace. Why don't you bring us up to date?
Sir, thank you very much for having me on your show today. As you said, we're looking forward to another Senate candidate debate this Sunday. And with that and the Obama statement this Wednesday, we have these two public moments that should be seen as opportunities for all of us here in Nebraska and elsewhere to look clearly at the dangers that face our state of Nebraska and also our country. And specifically, I'm talking about war danger, and especially the real threat of nuclear war that continues to be a threat to America as it has for decades. But there is, in fact, more danger now because of Ukraine, and which is one of the few places in the world where two nuclear armed forces can clash directly within a few hours. So in addition, we have the ISIS religious extremists that plague the world that the president talked about. They're backed by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other Gulf monarchies. And both of these two dangers, Ukraine and ISIS, demand good people to have a steady hand when they're in the U.S. Senate. So I'm especially critical of Ben Sasse and the naive aggression that he's displayed towards Russia. And as you just said, for those who are listening, Mr. Sass is my Republican opponent for the U.S. Senate in Nebraska. His campaign website, like you mentioned, talks about, and this is the quote here, overwhelming force to decimate our enemies. So clearly, in Mr. Sass's mind and his worldview, this clearly includes Russia. So Mr. Sass wants to deploy anti-ballistic missile systems in Poland and the Czech Republic, and he's even suggested anti-Russian missiles in Ukraine. And these would undermine the important peace treaties negotiated by President Reagan and ex-Soviet President Gorbachev to eliminate the entire class of short-range nuclear missiles from the world. So I'm asking Americans to reject Mr. Sass's blusters as military provocations, because Mr. Sass has learned nothing from the continued failures of the Republican and Democrat chicken hawk neoconservatives. And I wonder, and one has to wonder what Mr. Sass's goal is when the realities and the results of his kind of policies would be dead American soldiers and even domestic casualties of nuclear war for the sake of hothead Eastern European leaders who have an axe to grind with Russia. And this would include those rulers in Kiev.
Right.
The first Cold War, it ended a quarter century ago, and many Americans have forgotten what it was like to live under that threat of nuclear terror. Russia remains a superpower, and Ben Sass's return to the policies of confrontation and brinksmanship would mean literally risking everything. And Ben Sass is pushing a policy of incalculable folly. And there's nothing in all of Ukraine that is worth the loss of a single Nebraska farm or Nebraska town or American farm or American town. And we have no treaty with Ukraine, nor should we. They're too close to Russia, and we have no interest there. This conflict should be settled by regional powers, and we've got no dog in this fight. So whether
absolutely, and congratulations on that.
Thank you very much, sir.
That's a profile in courage compared to a lot of candidates. Let me ask you though,
sure.
Nebraska, right? I mean, the cliche from the Beltway elites might be, well, those are the isolationists out there. I would not say isolation. I would say people who approach the question of war and peace with the necessary seriousness and sober realism. But it looks to me like Sass would be seriously out of step with most Nebraskans with that kind of incendiary kamikaze rhetoric, right? You want to decimate, use overwhelming force to decimate Russia? Well, ask Napoleon, ask Hitler. That doesn't turn out so well.
It doesn't turn out so well, and we have to have some compassion for the good people of Nebraska and America. I mean, we are a very heavily propagandized country, I think, and there's a lot of war drums beating now. And even though these war drums keep beating in Nebraska and across the country, I agree with you when you say that this is not in step with the people of Nebraska. They've been sold for a year on the idea of attacking Assad and how bad, and pointing all the fingers at Russian aggression, to speak nothing of the color coups. And these color coups have been going on for quite a while, and it's unreasonable to keep going with these color coups. So I think this is definitely the wrong kind of thinking. And whether Mr. Sass realizes it or not, Russia has very real nuclear weapons and has not been threatening to the American people. So he should know better as a candidate to advocate for a policy that could lead to thermonuclear war. I think,
and this is not just you saying that, right? We have an authority like Professor Stephen Cohen for the last several months has been saying that there's an immediate danger of at least tactical nuclear warfare in Ukraine. Because as you point out, this is it's not maybe the only place in the world. You could think of something like that happening in the Far East, but not through any constellation we see today. But Ukraine is where two nuclear armed forces could clash.
Right. Well, Nebraskans want a rational foreign policy that candidates like Mr. Sass can't grasp. And these kinds of candidates want us on a permanent war footing that would create killer budget cuts to the social safety net in order to pay for their wars. So Nebraskans, I don't think, want to risk this kind of worst choice scenario when they can have a better choice, a good choice. And what that would be good jobs, plenty of good jobs, good homes, quality education, and world-class infrastructure that they need to support healthy children and strong children. And this is not in line with the constant, endless wars, budget cuts, bailouts, and economic misery that keep Wall Street in control of our economy. So the solution is to start working with reasonable governments that can develop into partnerships for the U.S. that can build the whole world, not just the U.S., but the whole world up. And Mr. Sass isn't offering that type of thing.
And Dan, the solution is also you. Tell us how people can be part of your solution.
Well, thanks very much, Webster. That's very kind. You can reach me at danfornebraska.com. I do need the support. We're behind the game right now. We're working on a write-in campaign, it looks like, but we have a chance to start making the kind of shift in this election cycle, in this economy too, but this election cycle. And I know you have a lot of guests on today that are also making that shift. But my program deserves your attention and support as we try to historically.
The music is cutting us off now, so it's danfornebraska.com, danfornebraska.com. And we'll see you next week, Dan.
All right. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. danfornebraska.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C., and it's the afternoon of Friday, the 12th of September. Now, let's change gears a little bit. Let's go out to the Bay Area of California. And here we have this interesting problem, right? People always say that they want to have civil debates. They want to have debates about issues. And, of course, organizations sometimes build themselves up on this. The League of Women Voters, for example, I believe their charter is that they're supposed to promote voter turnout. They're supposed to educate people about the choices, the issues, the candidates, and so forth. And traditionally, the League of Women Voters, they sponsor candidate debates, and those are more or less open debates. If you're on the ballot, and if you're a generally recognized candidate, I think you ought to be part of it. And one of the problems is out there in the 5th Congressional District of Napa, Sonoma, Santa Rosa, and so forth, you've had the typical newfangled California primary under which the top two vote-getters then appear on the ballot for the final decision in the general election on November 4th. But for some reason, the League of Women Voters of Napa and Sonoma and that entire congressional district don't want to have a debate. And it looks to me like this is a rather partisan ploy. It seems to favor one candidate, the incumbent, Mike Thompson, 9-term Democrat, over his challenger, James Hinton, who is running on a tax Wall Street, 1% Wall Street sales tax, and nationalize the Fed. So I'd like to invite James Hinton to join us now and give us an outline of this rather strange situation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Webster.
Welcome.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters have excluded me from Monday's forum in Santa Rosa on the 15th. So we're having a voter awareness party in front of the debate with students from Sonoma State this Monday night. We'll be gathering between 5 and 5:30. It's down at the Santa Rosa City Council chambers. Okay, it starts at 6, and like I said, we'll be down between 5 and 5:30. The address is 100 Santa Rosa Avenue in Santa Rosa. It's outrageous to have an organization like this, the League of Women Voters, and not conduct a fair and open debate for the election of the voters. The League of Women Voters is supposed to be, and if they raise money with the promise that they are going to promote voting, voter participation, and voter turnout, and do voter education. If that's their purpose, then they have to have debates that allow the participation of qualified candidates. And I think we've found ourselves in interesting spot here where it's not your classic Republican versus Democrat, two Wall Street-backed candidates with the same ideas. We have an independent candidate in myself with the Tax Wall Street New Deal program against your Wall Street darling, Mike Thompson. So it's obvious they're trying to protect Wall Street darling Thompson here by avoiding this. In the primary, there was another guy from the Free Soil Party, and they excluded us completely. And I asked them at the time, I said, how do we get invited to these? And they said, okay, well, if you win, we'll invite you to our next ones before the election. And in Sonoma County, they specifically said, we've never had Mike Thompson here since we've redistricted. So they keep re-electing him in Sonoma County. And he's never, since redistricting, this will be the third election of his 8 terms where it's included Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, and Sonoma. I'm a huge part of Sonoma County. And they continue to not have him. So
even though people would have the right to get to know him, right? If they're new in the district, he should make a point of being there and also promoting an exchange of ideas with the challenger.
Yeah. I mean, if he can come out and tell everybody why he's great and he should get reelected, that's how it should be. But to hide and just let the papers dominate, how great he is and how he's going to win in a landslide and nothing else matters is ridiculous. Let the people hear, and if they like the same old stack lunch they've been getting the last 16 years, they can have it again. It's on the table. But if they want new ideas for 30 million productive new jobs instead of war, right? We're the jobs and no war. Peace and jobs right here. Let's stay out of Iran. Let's stay out of Syria. And let's reinvest that money in America, building our crumbling infrastructure, putting people to work.
James, let me ask you, I think a lot of people are seething with indignation right now. Do you have a way for us to get in touch with the League of Women Voters that is organizing this debate? Do you have an email for them?
Not off the top of my...
All right, then let me ask you to do this. Why don't you send me this email after the show when you get a chance, and I will put that up on Twitter for sure, and maybe I can find some other ways.
I believe their Twitter handles. I believe their Twitter handles are all at capital LWV, League of Women Voters. And then they'll say boom. But I can't really see. I don't really see any Twitter handles though for Napa and Sonoma County, the two that said they would have me and then changed their mind. So there's 4 forums in Napa County, and me and Mike were excluded from all of them. Okay, and this is our home turf, right? I'm from Napa. He's from St. Helena. There's 3 of them, I think, are in Napa and 1 in St. Helena, and we've been excluded from all of them. So,
again, why don't you, an email address would be good, these Twitter handles would be good, and I guess capital means Sacramento. Is that the idea, Capital League of Women Voters?
Well, I have mentioned their phone number on Twitter before. I know if you follow me on Twitter, you can probably see 1 or 2 tweets where I did put their phone number up there where people could call in because.
Let me just see if we can find it. I'd love to give people a chance to act on that indignation that I can feel seething in the audience, but maybe that's going to take too long.
Let me see if I can help you find it faster. Okay.
You can, I think. And again, this is people talk about voter suppression, ballot access. Well, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Okay.
So if you can find it.
How about 707-785-3151?
3151. 707-785-3151. And that's going to be at least one relevant office of the League of Women Voters. And I would urge people to call them and say, hey, this is outrageous. You need to have a congressional debate where Mike Thompson squares off against James Hinton. They're on the ballot. That's the American way. It's an open and shut case. The music is reminding us that our clock is gone, James. So we'll see you next week, and I'll get people interested in this outrage on. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. And now we're going to introduce a new and interesting candidate, and this takes us to Harvard Square, Harvard Yard. It takes us to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and this wonderful area of all kinds of intellectual leadership, and Boston University is there, and this huge complex. And there we find Jason Lowenthal, who is a candidate of the Green Rainbow Party of Massachusetts. And Jason's going to tell us at the very beginning, again, exactly what communities are part of the district. But he is also fighting to get on the ballot, and he has a story which will make your hair stand on end. So without further ado, let me introduce Jason Lowenthal, and it's the 7th Congressional District of Massachusetts, and the current opponent would be, maybe you help me, Jason, the Democrat incumbent is interestingly enough, another Pelosi man, and I'll check his name in a minute. Welcome, Jason, please. What's the situation?
Good afternoon, Webster. Thanks for having us on today. The situation is sad. We went to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, the Elections Division, back in February to fill out a form asking for the proper petitions that we needed to collect 2,000 signatures of voters in the district and resubmit them by the end of July for our name to appear on the ballot. We got the forms. We collected nearly 3,000 signatures, recognizing that not every individual that we had sign our petition would, have provided the proper information or would have signed their signature in a legible manner. And when we went to submit the signatures, we were told by representatives of the Secretary of the Commonwealth in the Elections Division that they were unacceptable because we got them on a white sheet of paper instead of a yellowish tan sheet of paper that is reserved for third-party candidates. Only Democrats and Republicans are allowed to submit their signatures on white sheets of paper. And it gives a new meaning
to the idea of yellow journalism. In this case, we have yellow candidates, but of course, if the shoe was on the other foot. Please go ahead.
I was going to say, if anything, I think it's the incumbents that are a little scared. They're scared of facing viable opponents. I think. I know that just a few days ago in the 6th District, which is just north of Boston, where we are, that one Seth Moulton unseated a nearly 2-decade incumbent that, he had been in Congress since the 90s, a fellow by the name of John Tierney. And right. I think that was a wake-up call to the establishment Democrats in the Commonwealth. Our platform lines up very closely with Mr. Moulton's. Representative Capuano's platform and his views align almost perfectly with Mr. Tierney. And I think that the Mass Dems see the writing on the wall, and they're frantically trying to hold on to their power in a similar way to how wet garbage would stick to the road.
And indeed, that's Capuano. And just for people who are not keeping score up there, Capuano is a close lieutenant and retainer of Pelosi. He's kind of like Mike Thompson, as we've just heard. And Capuano in particular was the transition director when the Democrats took over the Congress. I guess he does transitions in and transitions out. But this is another Democratic wheelhorse hack who's out of touch.
Don't forget he was also put in charge of congressional ethics reform, job he failed at miserably.
Okay. So now, what's the next step for you? And tell us, again, tell people how they can get involved, your website, your Facebook, whatever people can do to help you in this quest.
Sure. Our website is jplowenthal.com. That's JPLOWENTHAL. We can be found on Facebook at facebook.com/ JP Arabic numeral 4 Congress, and we're also on Twitter at JP Arabic numeral 4 Congress. The 7th district, is in Boston. It stretches from the communities of Somerville and Chelsea, just north of Boston. It goes out west to include Cambridge, as you were pointing out, and Harvard Yard. And then we travel south through the communities of Boston, Roslindale, Mattapan, Roxbury, Dorchester. And then my community, Randolph, which is much further south in the suburbs than Boston, we're connected to the district through a little swath of land, forest land in Milton, because, again, it's a case of gerrymandering, which is a dialogue for an entirely another day.
Invented in Massachusetts.
Yes, actually. Well, Eldridge Gary, correct?
There we go. So now,
what we're doing today...
How are you fighting?
Yes, we submitted a complaint to Suffolk Superior Court, which is the local Massachusetts jurisdiction. But again, we were met with an unbelievable set of coincidences. When we went to file a motion to compel the Commonwealth to file their answer quick to our complaint at a hastened pace, what we found was that through some sort of bureaucratic error, our complaint had been dismissed because they did not think that we paid the filing fee for the complaint. Thankfully, we had the receipt. We were able to show it to the court, and we got our complaint refiled, but the sort of gap in time has allowed the Commonwealth to not file their reply until after they sent in the order for the ballots to be printed, which just is astounding to me. There's this coincidence that has allowed them to drag their feet, and this individual, William Francis Galvin, who is charged with the responsibility of ensuring an open and free democracy in the Commonwealth, just seems to be not interested. And I'm not alleging some sort of grand conspiracy or a level of grand corruption or anything of that nature. However, I believe that there is, and again, I'm not saying that this is unique to Massachusetts. I think that within the status quo, there's a sort of subconscious tendency of bureaucrats to favor the incumbent, to favor the status quo. I don't think they do it consciously, but I think that there's I think in the back of their head that there's this idea. Massachusetts is unique within the United States in that we're dominated by the Democratic Party. And in many ways, the Commonwealth is sort of like communist China. We have liberal Democrats and we have conservative Democrats. And if you want a place at the table in terms of governing, you must register as a Democrat.
And I think the problem is they're all Wall Street Democrats. I think this is most. I think that is also a very important part of the problem.
Oh, absolutely. But another part of the problem, though, is that because the Commonwealth is known for one-party rule, we have cases of corruption that I don't think exist anywhere else in the United States. The fellow that I'm running against, Mr. Capuano, he has, if you were to, just open up a browser to Google and do even the most cursory search, he was implicated as accepting money, a donation for a quid pro quo that the judge called bribery and resulted in the donor, in quotation marks, being sent to jail. More recently, we just, the probation department just was found guilty. John O'Brien was the head of the department of engaging in another quid pro quo scheme where they offered jobs and promoted friends of legislators for the probation department to wield some sway in developing policy. And this is a case that's already been...
Jason, I'm sorry, the music is coming in the background. This is automatic beyond my control. Whether this guy Galvin, whether he's consciously corrupt or he just does it, only his shrink knows for sure. But I would urge people, try to do what you can to get Jason Lowe. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio in Washington, D.C. Now, we got to cover a certain amount of terrain here. I just wanted to go back to the situation in the Middle East. What you seem to find is we're crystallizing an axis of Turkey, Qatar, with ISIS being protected by them, or they're soft on ISIS, and probably Hamas goes in that group too. And since the British have now said they will not do any air attacks, and I think that means Iraq too, we have Britain, Turkey, Qatar, ISIS, Hamas. I think that's a constellation. The other one, of course, is the people who are sincerely opposed to ISIS. That would be Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and we might want to look at Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, because remember, they did that airstrike into Libya to attack the Kumu Ansar al-Sharia terrorist forces. Now, we've just had a meeting in Jeddah. Kerry went there to Saudi Arabia. Present were Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, Saudi, Qatar, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and Turkey. And the demands were pretty meek. Please stop financing ISIS, especially by your private citizens and bankers. Stop glorifying ISIS on Al Jazeera of Qatar and Al Arabiya of the Saudis. Please mobilize your scholars, your ulema, to condemn them with fatwas. Egypt, I think, already moving in that direction. And then there's this unfortunate thing about a training base. You do not want Saudi Arabia training anybody, because they'll turn out to be pretty much looking like ISIS. Now, today, Turkey has, they're hosting Kerry. And remember, the Turkish position now is Turkey refused to sign even this bland, vague support declaration for Kerry yesterday. Turkey is saying there'll be no use of Turkish bases for any attacks on ISIS. Hey, wait a minute. Those are NATO bases. And the U.S. has been paying through the nose military aid to Turkey. So, hey, Erdogan, you want to go with the U.S., you want to go with the Muslim Brotherhood, a useful alternative. And they also, they don't want to cooperate in any way. And they hide behind the fact, they say, oh, please have pity on us. We have 50 diplomats who were seized in northern Iraq. This is a cover story. So now on Sunday, Kerry will go on to Egypt. I think that's very interesting. Now, the last thing. I was planning to devote my last segment to more on how Perfide Albion is responsible to a large degree for the outbreak of World War I. I was going to be telling you about how Lord Kitchener, as a genocidalist, prolonged World War I when there might have been spontaneous attempts by other participants to end it. But this, we don't have time for it. I actually want to shift gears. You may not expect me to defend the existence of the United Kingdom, but I do. I am calling on the people of Scotland to vote no on this referendum. This is not a referendum about independence. Independence, dear friends, is not on the table. They're offering you localism. They're offering you particularism. They're offering you the equivalent of a Bantustan, the Royal Scottish Bantustan of local control, autogestion, community control, and divide and conquer. It will be a micro-state, a mini-state, a rump state, may quickly become a failed state. Independence is not on the table. That's a cruel hoax. And in particular, you're going to get the British pound controlled by the Bank of England. We got Krugman usefully getting into the act this week saying that this is a recipe for disaster. The Bank of England is going to control your currency, and you call that independence? That's not independence. And you're going to have the Queen as the head of state. She can overthrow your governments, as she did in Australia in the 70s, and meddling as she did in Canada over recent years. That's absolutely unacceptable. Suppose you use the euro. You'll be subjected to the Merkel austerity machine at the European Central Bank. If you go with the pound, we've said it, you'll be under the control of Threadneedle Street. Suppose you have your own currency. That will go the way of the Icelandic crown, driven down to about 1/3 of its value, and your living standard driven down to the same level. This is a counterinsurgency ploy. Remember, what the British do, and in this case they're willing to do this in the flesh of the Scots, the British use their own country as a demonstration and advertising and shop window for the policy they want to push around the world, right? They want to have killer austerity, the end of Keynesianism. They put Thatcher in there, and off of Thatcher, you spin off then Reagan and that entire trail of tears here in the United States. What they're signaling now is break up the modern nation state. And you know, here we go back to 1310. We go back to Gian Galeazzo Visconti and Dante Alighieri meeting in Milan, the foundation of the Visconti Milan state. That is the prototype of the modern state. Gian Galeazzo Visconti up until about 1399 or so. That's where it all comes from. Then Louis XI of France, Henry VII, Earl of Richmond, and then the people who followed along with that. If this Scottish referendum goes through, you will see a world orgy of secessionism. There will be not just the Catalonians, not just the Venetians, but every crackpot relic. You're going to see the Night of the Living Dead, these Nation Foutu. The Nation Foutu are going to come out of the woodwork, and they're all going to demand national self-determination, right down to the last Saustall, right? The local pigsty will declare independence and demand its independence. So this is simply a fraud, and I want to commend George Galloway and his yeoman service. I am very favorably impressed by Galloway. He's a Scot. He's got working class creds. He's been up there bashing these petty bourgeois characters who are trying to sell this. He says if you have Scotland under the Scottish National Party, it'll be based on grudge and it'll be churlish. And what grudge means, you look at Ukraine, their hatred of Russia, that's grudge. You look at Polish politics, grudge, hate Russia. The Baltics, same story, a grudge, they hate Russia. This character, Salmon, I think is an unprincipled demagogue, the head of the Scottish National Party. Those are the oligarchs of Scotland, right? The working guys vote for the Labour Party. Obviously, they're duped, but certainly the Scottish National Party. This is no bargain. So what they're pushing, I'm comparing it to the pork chop nationalists, right here back in the 60s and 70s. You had your pork chop cultural nationalists. I would call these guys the haggis cultural nationalists. So they're going to have a Bantustan, and they'll have some, you can do your local policies, but nothing of any importance. Rosa Luxemburg had strictures about the independence of Poland. What she said was, it's going to be more progressive if you keep it together. The general rule of politics is that the smaller the unit, the easier it is for oligarchs to control it. It's why states' rights is the most reactionary slogan in American politics, because whereas in Washington, huge interests clash and a certain margin of maneuver develops for the average person, if it's a state, then an oligarch or congeries of oligarchs, they can easily control a state. So this is why the world policy of the CIA is to break up existing states, microstates, mini-states, partition studies. You know my litany. That includes Sudan carved, Iraq carved, Yugoslavia carved, then Serbia carved, Kosovo, and of course they have a 5-way division and the Bernard Lewis plan ready for Iran. They have a 4-way division ready for Pakistan. I deplore the fact that Russia today thinks they have to get on the side of these secessionists. It's ridiculous. Galloway provides a very good antidote. So vote no, and we'll see you next week.